On the final day, after the last of the new processes had been implemented and the final handover files sent, I walked into Dad's office unannounced. For old time's sake. He looked up. "You did good," he said simply. "Not thank you. Not I was wrong. Just you did good." I nodded. "I know." And for once, he didn't correct me, didn't remind me who built the company, didn't bring up Sienna. He just leaned back in his chair and said, "We could use someone like you, you know. If you ever—" "I won't," I interrupted. "But thanks." He nodded again, slower this time, and I left. No closure, just truth. I found Sienna in the elevator lobby holding 2 coffees. She handed one to me without a word. "Want to sit for a minute?" she asked. I shrugged. "Sure." We ended up on the roof, an unassuming concrete patch that overlooked a skyline we'd once dreamed about owning together when we were kids with notebooks and business plans sketched in crayon. We didn't say much at first, just sipped and breathed. Then she spoke. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. "I know. I just got caught up in what they expected of me, in trying to prove I was worthy of what they gave me." I turned to her. "And did you?" She looked down. "No, not really. You were always better at this. I think I knew it. Maybe that's why I couldn't stand to share it." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was enough. I set my coffee down and stood. "I should go." "Will I see you again?" she asked. "Maybe," I said, "but probably not here." She smiled, sadly. "Where then?" I looked out across the city. "Where I belong, where I build." She nodded slowly. "Good. You're really good at that." It wasn't fanfare. It wasn't redemption. It was something else. Recognition. The kind that comes not when you scream for it, but when you've stopped needing it altogether. 2 weeks later, I was back in my own office. It was quiet, save for the low hum of my kettle and the soft ping of my team's Slack messages. No big corner windows, no assistant knocking every 10 minutes, no gold-embossed doors or framed photos of CEOs shaking hands, just peace and purpose. I looked around and smiled, not because things were perfect, but because they were mine. Every decision, every risk, every inch of growth had come from something I built, without approval, without applause, and certainly without permission. He had no reply to that, no speech prepared. For once, the great Arthur Bennett was quiet. I turned to the others. "Here's my offer. I'll restructure your client retention protocols, clean the pipeline, repair what can be salvaged, and then I'm out. No contract extensions, no fancy titles, no photos for LinkedIn." Mr. Greaves folded his arms. "And what do you want in return?" "Nothing," I said. Then I looked directly at my father. "Except for you to sit there and watch me fix what you told me I could never touch." The air grew still, tight, and then, surprisingly, Dad nodded. Once, silent, like a man finally recognizing a truth that had been tapping on his shoulder for years. "Very well," he said. "Do what you came to do." I opened my laptop and began to speak, not as a daughter or a sister, but as a strategist, as the only person in that room who actually knew what she was doing. And as I watched their faces shift, from skepticism to quiet agreement to reluctant respect, something clicked inside me. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclamation. I didn't need their approval, but they were damn well going to remember my name. The funny thing about respect, when it finally arrives, it feels late. It doesn't come with an apology or a dramatic confession, no tearful speeches, no cinematic slow clap. It arrives quietly, like steam rising from a cup left out too long. Useful, yes, but never quite warm enough. The project took just over 3 weeks. I reorganized the client retention structure from the ground up, cleared outdated CRM data, streamlined communication pipelines, introduced a real-time risk assessment dashboard, because shockingly, they'd been making decisions based on quarterly hunches and gut feelings. Sienna did as I asked. To her credit, she didn't push back, didn't interfere. Not once. She just listened. It was jarring. I'd spent most of my adult life assuming that if I ever stood in this position, wielding power, giving direction, she'd fight me at every turn. But she didn't. In fact, sometimes I'd catch her just watching me during meetings, like she was seeing me for the first time. Dad, however, was harder to read. He hovered, sat in on calls he had no business attending, asked questions he already knew the answers to, just to test me. But I didn't rise to it. I gave short, direct answers, kept my posture still, my voice calm. I wasn't here for his validation. I was here to finish something. The boardroom hadn't changed. Same smell of over-polished walnut, Same dull artwork chosen by a committee trying too hard. Same exact bottled water, stacked in triangles like a business school diorama. What had changed was me. Sienna sat at the head, trying not to look nervous. She'd worn that same cream blouse again, probably hoping it would bring her luck. I didn't bother dressing for them. I wore black, sharp and clean, like a woman with no time to waste. Then came the rustle of papers, murmurs of impatience, and finally, my father walked in. Still broad-shouldered, still charming when he wanted to be, but older now, thinner. He looked at me as if I were a painting he half remembered hanging in a hallway somewhere, familiar but dusty. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said with a stiff smile. I didn't return it. "No, you wouldn't." The board sat up straighter. A few glanced between us with quiet curiosity, like they sensed a storm, but weren't sure where the lightning would strike. Sienna cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. As you know, the Vantage Lux account has withdrawn, but we have a chance to stabilize and potentially recover future partnerships if we move fast." She turned toward me. "This is Ava. Some of you know her as my sister, but she's also one of the top independent consultants in brand strategy and crisis response. She's agreed to oversee our corrective action under full autonomy." Someone scoffed, an older man on the end, Mr. Greaves, head of compliance. "With respect, we can't just hand over control to someone who walked out 2 years ago." "She didn't walk," Sienna said. "She was pushed." The room fell silent. Even Dad blinked. I took a breath. "Let's not waste time. You're all wondering why I'm here, so let me be clear. I'm not here for validation or for apologies. I'm here because your company is hemorrhaging value and you don't know how to stop it." Another beat of silence. Then I dropped it. "I've been working with Vantage Lux for 6 months." Gasps, sharp intakes of breath. Someone's pen hit the table. I continued, calm and steady. "They didn't abandon you randomly. They left because they didn't feel heard, because the person assigned to them didn't ask the right questions, because image mattered more than listening. I asked, I listened, and I retained them under a different banner." Dad's face darkened. "So, you stole them?" I looked him dead in the eye. "No, you gave them away, you just didn't know it." She hesitated. That was new. Sienna never hesitated. Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice like someone about to confess to a priest. "Vantage Lux is gone. I mean, completely gone. They pulled out of all 5 regions. The board is screaming. Dad is threatening to come out of retirement. And I don't know what happened. I did everything right. I followed the retention strategy. I sent them a bloody Rolex last quarter." I raised an eyebrow. "A Rolex?" She blinked. "It was engraved." I wanted to laugh. I didn't. "They didn't leave because of a watch, Sienna." Her expression twisted. "Then why? Why would they just walk?" I sipped my coffee, watching her squirm, and for a brief moment I felt that dangerous pull, power laced with pain. I could tell her the truth, that I had them, that I'd signed them 6 months ago under a different name and handled the exact same problems she'd ignored. But I didn't. Not yet. "Maybe they wanted a different approach," I said instead. "Something less performative." She flinched, and for a second I saw the girl beneath the armor, the one who used to play Monopoly with me on rainy Saturdays, the one who cried when I left for uni, the one who stopped hugging me after Dad made her CEO. "I need you," she said finally. "I don't care what Dad thinks. Or the board. I need you to help fix this. Please." The please didn't sound like hers. It sounded borrowed, learned, desperate, and I believed her. But belief isn't the same as forgiveness. "You want me to come back?" I asked carefully. "No, I want you to consult, quietly. Just help me get through this quarter. You're the only one who understands the mechanics of retention, of damage control." Mechanics. She still thought I was an engineer, a fixer, a cog. I leaned back, folding my arms. "On one condition," I said. She tensed. "Anything. I want full autonomy, no oversight, no edits, no branding. I tell you what to do, you do it." She swallowed hard. "Okay. And I want a meeting, with Dad and the board. I want them in the room when I speak." She blinked. "Why? Because I want them to know who's fixing this, for once." There it was, the flinch, but she nodded. "You'll get it," she said. We sat in silence for a moment, 2 sisters on opposite ends of a broken empire, and then she whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. "I didn't know how to lead," she said. "I just knew how to look like I could." I said nothing, because I'd known that all along. And now, They were gone. Transferred. Quietly. To me. I only found out because Sienna mentioned it in her voicemail. I lost Vantage Lux, she whispered. They pulled the plug. No notice. No reason. Just gone. The irony? She was calling to beg help from the person who'd retained that very client. Me. Of course, I didn't rub it in. That's not my style. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something shift in me, because up until that moment, I'd kept my world and hers separate. Deliberately. I never poached clients. I never mentioned my last name. I avoided events where our circles might overlap. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But peace had a funny way of knocking twice. And maybe, just maybe, this time I needed to open the door. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with my team. I told them, calmly, professionally, that we had an unexpected opportunity involving a former affiliation. I didn't say it was personal. I didn't say it was my sister, but they saw it in my eyes. For the first time, I felt it too. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about recognition, about reclaiming the narrative. I'd built something solid, ethical, and thriving, while they drowned in their own arrogance. So no, I didn't plan to gloat, but I wouldn't hide either. If my sister wanted help, she would have to see me. Not the version she grew up mocking, not the lesser daughter, not the quiet girl in the back row. Me, the founder, the strategist, the one who saved the client she lost. I met her at a cafe, not because I wanted to keep it casual, but because I didn't want to step into that building again. The Bennett & Co. headquarters was still draped in the same pretentious marble and brass aesthetic I'd helped pitch 5 years ago, back when Dad still took my calls, back when Sienna still copied my notes during product meetings and pretended they were her own thoughts. I didn't want their boardroom. I wanted a neutral space, somewhere I didn't feel 16 years old again, clutching a presentation no one would read. She was already there when I arrived, sunglasses on, lips tight, and posture straight like a woman trying not to drown in her own curated perfection. But her eyes, they'd changed. There was no gloss in them anymore, just fatigue and panic. She stood when she saw me, half smiled like she still had the upper hand. I didn't smile back. "Thanks for coming," she said, as if this were a casual brunch. I sat, "You said it was urgent," until the moment I heard Sienna's voice, cracking under pressure, calling for the sister she never saw until she needed her. I'd spent so long building my own orbit, but maybe, just maybe, it was time they finally felt my gravity. When people say start your own business, they don't usually mean it the way I did. They mean get a loan, make a splash, post on LinkedIn every other week with captions like, "Just signed my first client," or "Grind never stops." But for me, it was about silence, control. I didn't want attention. I wanted autonomy. No more being spoken over in meetings. No more making myself smaller to keep the peace. No more being the good daughter. So I chose stealth. I registered Kepler Partners under a holding name. Set up a modest office. Well, a spare room in my flat with too many mugs and 3 monitors. I didn't announce anything. No launch party, no press. I let the work speak, and it did. Turns out, when you've spent a decade cleaning up disasters quietly, word spreads, quietly. One former client sent a referral. That turned into 2, then 6, then 12. I didn't even have a website until year 2, but they kept coming, not because I was the loudest, but because I delivered. I specialized in brand rehabilitation and crisis strategy, basically helping high-profile companies fix the messes they didn't want anyone to know about. The irony wasn't lost on me. By year 3, I had a lean team of 7, all remote, all brilliant. I paid them well, offered flexibility, and treated them like adults, which was apparently revolutionary. We had no hierarchy chart, just a Slack thread full of memes and deadlines. And the best part? None of my clients knew I was that Bennett, the sister, the shadow. I didn't need them to. Let Sienna have the headlines. I had the results. But fate, as it tends to, has a twisted sense of humor. About 6 months ago, we signed a client named Vantage Lux, a luxury retail conglomerate struggling to recover after a scandal involving one of its celebrity brand ambassadors. It was a delicate case, reputation on the line, shareholders breathing down their necks. We handled it discreetly, swiftly, and with class. Our messaging strategy stabilized their market cap within 4 weeks. We even helped secure a new ambassador, someone cooler, controversy-proof. What I didn't know until very recently was that Vantage Lux had once been Bennett & Co.'s crown jewel client, but they never invited the plumber to dinner. I remember one board meeting in particular, 6 weeks after our father's health scare. Sienna was seated at the head of the table, radiant as ever in that cream silk blouse she wore to every important presentation. I sat 2 seats down, unintroduced. A man I'd worked with for over a year leaned over and whispered, "Are you the note-taker?" I didn't flinch, just smiled and nodded. That day, I watched my sister pitch an acquisition strategy I'd drafted on a napkin in a Glasgow cafe while waiting for a delayed train. She flubbed half of it, forgot the supply chain contingencies entirely, but no one noticed, because she said it with a smile. With presence. Afterwards, I sat in the corridor outside the glass doors, staring at the reflection of my own face. I looked tired of being useful but invisible, tired of waiting for someone to say, "She built this." But that's the thing about being invisible. You see everything. You see who talks too much and who listens too little. You learn which suppliers bluff on margins, which execs cut corners, which junior analyst is secretly brilliant and just needs someone to believe in her. I paid attention, and while no one asked for my opinions, I kept collecting them like puzzle pieces. Eventually, I stopped hoping to be promoted. I started planning to leave, not out of spite, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew something they didn't. I was never meant to inherit. I was meant to create. Leaving wasn't dramatic. I didn't storm out or slam doors. I just stopped showing up. I emailed in my resignation, offered a clean transition plan, and smiled when my father wrote back, "We'll miss your support. Good luck finding something with less stress." Less stress. As if I'd been playing assistant in a flower shop. In truth, the day I walked out of Bennett & Co., I was already 4 months into building my own consultancy. Discreet, remote first, values-led. I called it Kepler Partners, named after the astronomer who proved the world didn't revolve around anyone. By the end of the first year, I had 6 clients, 2 of whom had previously worked with us at Bennett. They didn't switch because of me. They switched because of how I worked. Because I listened. Because I didn't need a glossy front page or a curated quote in Forbes. I just got results. And I liked being unknown, untraceable, free, until last night. And now, she needed me. Funny how life works. A part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to taste the sweet syrup of poetic justice. But another part, the older, quieter part of me, was already on edge. Because if Sienna was calling me, it meant something serious had gone wrong. And despite everything, despite the history, the rivalry, the bruises that never quite faded, she was still my sister, and I was still the one she called when it all fell apart. So I picked up the phone, took a breath, and pressed play on the voicemail again. Her voice cracked this time. "You're the only one who knows how to fix this," she said. "Dad's gonna lose everything. I can't do this on my own." That's when I felt it, the first shift. Not power, not pity, purpose. She got everything. The company, the praise, the spotlight. But she never got me. And this time, if I was going to help, it would be on my terms. If you've ever been overlooked while doing all the work behind the scenes, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments, or just hit like to let me know I'm not alone in this. Let's talk about what it means to take back your voice. There's a strange kind of ache that comes from being essential, but never recognized. When people hear I was in the business too, they assume I was a junior, or maybe in HR. Something soft. Not the girl who stayed past midnight in the conference room trying to salvage a dying logistics deal. Not the one who crunched the data that saved our largest retail client from walking. Not the one who wrote, edited, and pitched the entire green growth initiative, only to have Sienna presented as her own in Milan. I never corrected anyone. I suppose in my father's eyes, I was always just helping. A shadow to his golden heir. A good daughter who stayed quiet and didn't make things awkward. The first time I asked to lead a project, he chuckled. Not cruelly, just dismissively. "Love, you're brilliant, but your sister, she has presence. Clients want presence." Presence. That word haunted me for years. It wasn't that Sienna was unqualified. She was clever in her way, charming in meetings, quick with names and perfume samples. But when things broke, when margins disappeared, when a supplier went under with no warning, it was me they called, quietly, after hours. like a plumber sneaking in the back door to fix a burst pipe before the guests arrived. It was nearly midnight when my phone lit up with her name, Sienna, the last person I expected to call me, and certainly not with 3 missed calls and a voicemail that simply said, "Please, I need your help. I messed everything up." I stared at the screen for a full minute, wondering if this was a mistake. It had been over 2 years since she spoke to me, properly anyway, not counting the awkward nod at Christmas or the brief, "You still vegan," when she passed me the stuffing. But now she was calling me, and she sounded desperate. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the phone down slowly, almost ceremoniously, like it might explode if I moved too fast. And I sat there in the dark, listening to the silence swell around me. There's a kind of silence that's not empty. It's full of things you've never said. And I had a lot I hadn't said, like how it felt when our father handed her the company I spent a decade helping him build. How he'd made the announcement at that ridiculous garden party, champagne flutes and fake smiles everywhere, without even telling me beforehand. How she accepted the keys to Bennett & Co., like she'd earned them with blood and sweat, when in truth, I was the one who saved that company from collapse after the 23 Q4 spiral. Quietly, without credit, without a title, without even a proper thank you. They said she had leadership charisma. I had backroom tenacity. She had vision. I had execution. Translation? She was the face. I was the scaffolding. Replaceable, forgettable, unnecessary once the photo ops were over. I remember sitting in that party, wine untouched in my hand, smiling like it didn't matter, like I wasn't bleeding inside. And still, I stayed silent. I stayed silent when they told the press that Sienna was the strategic architect behind our big turnaround year. I stayed silent when they reassigned my entire portfolio to junior analysts under her command. And I even stayed silent when Dad told me over coffee and dry toast that it's time you found your own path now, sweetheart. So I did. But here's the thing. I didn't disappear. They just stopped looking. While they played corporate royalty in glossy magazines and LinkedIn award ceremonies, I was building something else. Not for revenge. Not to compete. Just to prove to myself I could. Something real. Something I could own.